The iron Essential, the darkness of space, pressed against the reinforced windows of the Iron Sentinel. A sleek destroyer that cut through the void like a predator through water. Commander Victoria Harrow stood on the bridge, her weathered hands gripping the edge of the tactical console. 32 years in the human space fleet had taught her that the universe was rarely quiet. And today, it seemed the cosmos had decided to prove it once again. "Status report," Harrow commanded, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had faced countless challenges across the stars. She was a woman of average height with steel-gray eyes and dark hair pulled back in a functional braid. Her uniform bore the insignia of command and the scars of 100 smaller conflicts. Lieutenant James Chun, the ship's chief tactical officer, looked up from his displays with the kind of expression that immediately set Harrow's nerves on edge. Chun had served under her for 5 years, and she knew his face well enough to read trouble in it. "Commander, we have multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace." "A lot of them," Shin said, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. "I'm reading." "Stand by." "I'm reading 250 distinct signatures. They're forming an attack pattern around our position." The bridge fell silent for a moment. Harrow didn't move. She didn't gasp or step back. Instead, she walked to the main view screen with measured steps and looked out at the void. There, between the distant stars, massive shapes were materializing. Each one was easily the size of a city block, their hulls reflecting the light of nearby stars in sharp, aggressive angles. Weapons arrays studded their surfaces like thorns on a predatory plant. It was the kind of sight that would have terrified ordinary civilians, but Harrow had trained her entire life for moments just like this. Communications, establish contact. Full spectrum scan. "I want to know everything about those ships," Harrow ordered, turning back to face her crew. Around her, men and women who had also trained for this moment moved with practiced efficiency. This was what they did. This was what humans did better than almost anything else in the galaxy. If the rumors were true, they faced impossible odds, and somehow found a way through Dr. Marcus Webb. The ship's chief science officer was hunched over his station, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Webb was younger than most of his peers, still in his late 30s, with the kind of mind that could process complex data patterns in seconds. "Commander, these ships are unlike anything in our databases. The design suggests advanced propulsion systems, energy weapons, and this is remarkable. They appear to be using a form of shield technology we haven't encountered before." The communications officer, a sharp-eyed woman named Lieutenant Sarah Park, looked back at Harrow. "I'm receiving a transmission, Commander. They're using a narrow-band frequency, but our systems are translating. It's a demand for immediate surrender." Harrow leaned back in her command chair, her fingers steepled before her. Around her, the bridge crew watched. These were moments that defined careers, that tested every ounce of training and experience. "Put them on speakers," Harrow said. The voice that filled the bridge was harsh and guttural, clearly synthesized through a translation matrix to approximate human vocal patterns. "This is Supreme Commander Zarthik of the Korvax Dominion. You are in violation of Korvax claimed space. Your vessel is surrounded and outgunned. You will power down all systems and prepare for boarding. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction. You have 60 seconds to respond." Harrow stood and straightened her uniform. She was a woman who had grown up in the colonies of New Horizon, a world that humans had built from scratch on a planet that wanted nothing more than to kill them. She had lost friends there to dust storms that could strip flesh from bone, to earthquakes that swallowed whole settlements, to the kind of struggles that separated the strong from the weak. She knew what it meant to face overwhelming odds, and she knew that surrender was often just a slower form of death. "Open a channel," Harrow commanded. All frequencies. Park's fingers moved across her console. Channel open, Commander. Harrow's voice was steady and clear when she spoke. This is Commander Victoria Harrow of the human destroyer Iron Sentinel. You are in neutral space, not Korvax territory. This region was open to all species under the Galactic Treaty of New Accord. We have committed no hostile acts. We have no quarrel with your people. I suggest you reconsider your approach. There was a pause. Then laughter filled the bridge, harsh and cruel. The kind of laughter that came from beings who had never known real hardship, who had never fought for every breath, who had never understood the true cost of conflict. Your boldness is admirable, human, but futile, Zarthik's voice responded. You are one ship. We are 250. Your defenses cannot withstand our fire. Lower your shields and weapon systems now, or we will tear your vessel apart piece by piece. Harrow turned to Chun. Full defensive posture. All weapon systems online. I want every defensive grid active. Aye, Commander, Chun replied, his voice tight. All systems coming online. Point defense grid active. Railgun batteries charging. Fusion reactors running at full capacity. They're moving in, Webb announced, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. They're tightening the formation. They're going to attack. Harrow walked to the center of her bridge, and every eye turned to her. These were her people, her crew, the men and women who had chosen to follow her out into the darkness of space. They trusted her with their lives. She would not betray that trust with cowardice or hesitation. Listen to me, Harrow said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. We are the descendants of humanity. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived earthquakes that split continents, storms that could demolish cities, predators that hunted us in the darkness. We didn't survive by surrendering. We survived by fighting. We survived by adapting. We survived by never, ever giving up. That's who we are. That's what flows through our veins. She paused, letting her words settle into the minds of her crew. Today, the galaxy gets to learn what that means. Today, they learn that humans don't fold. We don't break. We don't quit. We adapt. We overcome. We endure. The Iron Sentinel was built with one purpose, and that's to make sure that threats like this never reach our people. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to show them exactly why that exists. Chun looked at her with understanding in his eyes. He knew what she was saying. They all did. They were going to fight. Open a channel one more time, Harrow commanded. Directed frequency. Park made the adjustment. Channel open. Harrow's voice was ice cold now. Korvax Dominion, this is your final warning. You don't want what comes next. Leave this sector. Go home. Tell your leaders that you encountered humans who would rather die than surrender. Tell them we have the capability to back that up. This is your last chance. Asterisk Zarthik's laughter filled the bridge again. Your desperation is pathetic. All ships, attack formation Delta. Prepare all weapons. Fire on my mark in 5 seconds. Brace for impact, Harrow commanded, settling into her chair. Around her, the crew secured themselves, hands gripping armrests. Jaws clenched. The Iron Sentinel was a destroyer, not a battleship. She was designed for speed, agility, and precision strikes. Her hull was built from advanced composites of carbon and steel that could absorb and dissipate energy in ways that enemy engineers didn't fully understand. Her weapons were devastating railguns that could accelerate projectiles to relativistic speeds, fusion missiles that could vaporize city blocks, laser systems that could cut through armor like hot knives through butter. Her point defense grid consisted of 30,000 microweapons of various types, all controlled by an AI system named Horizon that could process information faster than any biological mind, but against 250 enemy warships, all converging at once. Even the Iron Sentinel was going to face its greatest test. A tactical display erupted with incoming fire. Hundreds of energy beams lanced out from the Korvax fleet, converging on the human destroyer from every angle. Plasma missiles streaked through space like angry hornets. Kinetic projectiles accelerated from magnetic launching systems. It was overwhelming firepower, the kind of assault that should have turned the Iron Sentinel into scrap metal in seconds. But then something remarkable happened. The point defense grid activated with a speed and precision that was almost impossible to comprehend. Thousands of micro-projectiles launched from the Iron Sentinel's hull, each one no larger than a grain of sand, but each one traveling at velocities that made them as deadly as anything in the arsenal. They intercepted incoming fire with surgical precision. Energy beams were redirected by carefully angled armor plates. Missiles were destroyed by point-blank explosions. Everything the Korvax threw at the human destroyer was neutralized or absorbed. "Return fire," Harrow commanded. "All weapons. Horizon, you have full control of combat operations. Make it count." The Iron Sentinel lit up like a star as her weapons came alive. The railgun spoke first, accelerating tungsten projectiles to nearly 10% of light speed. These rounds had kinetic energy equivalent to tactical nuclear weapons. When they hit the Korvax fleet, ships simply came apart. The outer armor that was supposed to be unbreakable shattered like glass. Hull breaches cascaded through entire vessels as the rounds punched through them, as if they were made of paper dot fusion missiles launched next, 20 of them spreading through the enemy formation. When they detonated, they created miniature suns, vaporizing everything within a kilometer radius. Entire squadrons of enemy warships ceased to exist. The Korvax shields that the science officer had detected earlier proved to be no match for the sheer energy output of human weapons. The Iron Sentinel's electronic warfare systems came online, flooding the Korvax communications network with viruses and override codes. Navigation systems failed across the enemy fleet. Targeting locks dissolved. Weapon systems that couldn't fire on the human destroyer instead fired on their own allies' dot in the space of just 30 seconds. The Korvax fleet went from an overwhelming force to a scattered wreck. 140 enemy ships were destroyed. Another 80 were crippled, their systems offline, their crews dying or abandoned. Only 30 enemy vessels managed to maintain any semblance of combat effectiveness. "All ships retreat." Zarthik's panicked voice screamed across all frequencies. "Fall back. Get to safety." On the bridge of the Iron Sentinel, Harrow watched the enemy fleet scatter in confusion and terror. There was no joy in her expression, no satisfaction, just the calm professionalism of someone who had done what needed to be done and now had to deal with the consequences. "Cease fire," she commanded. "Damage report." "Minor hull damage on sections 5 and 8, Chun reported, his voice shaking slightly with adrenaline. "Point defense grid at 98% efficiency. Fusion reactors stable. No casualties reported. We barely scratched our paint." Harrow nodded. She walked to the main view screen and looked out at the scattered remains of the Korvax fleet as the 30 surviving enemy ships jumped to hyperspace and vanished into the darkness. The battle was over. Asterisk. The galaxy Elastians, the news traveled through space faster than any ship could carry it. Within 3 days, the story of what had happened in neutral space near New Horizon had spread to every major governmental body, trading station, and independent colony throughout the known galaxy. 250 Korvax warships had attacked a single human destroyer. 90% of the Korvax fleet had been destroyed or crippled in less than 1 minute of combat. The humans had not suffered a single casualty, The reactions were immediate and varied across the galaxy. Some species celebrated. The Korvax dominion had expanded through conquest and intimidation for generations, crushing smaller civilizations and absorbing their territories. For the first time, someone had bloodied their nose, and badly. Other species felt curiosity and caution. Who were these humans? Where had they come from? What did they want? And a few species felt fear. If the Korvax, who had seemed unstoppable, could be defeated so decisively by a single ship, what did that mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? Supreme Commander Zarthik stood in the Korvax Council Chamber, a vast space that had hosted the deliberations of the Korvax leadership for 300 years. Around him, in elevated seats arranged in a semicircle, sat the other members of the Korvax High Command. They looked at him with expressions ranging from anger to shock to barely concealed fear. "Explain yourself," demanded Warlord Morgoth, his crystalline body reflecting the light of the chamber in 1,000 directions. "You took 250 ships to conquer a single human vessel. You returned with 30. The rest are dust." Zarthik's armor seemed to weigh heavier on his shoulders now. He had served the Korvax for 40 years, since before most of the beings in this chamber had even been born. The humans possessed technology unlike anything we anticipated. Their defensive systems were impossible, interrupted another council member, this one a reptilian creature with scales that shifted color with her mood. Right now, she was a deep shade of red. Our intelligence suggested the humans were primitive, recently emerged from their home world. They should not possess such weapons. They come from a death world, Zarthik said quietly. Our archaeological teams have since examined records that previous expeditions chose to ignore. Earth, their home planet, is a nightmare by our standards. High gravity, violent weather patterns, predators that would terrify most civilizations. They evolved in that environment. They survived it. When they finally developed technology and space travel, they did not do so out of peaceful curiosity. They did it because they knew that survival meant strength. Their weapons were not designed to fight alien races. They were designed to fight other humans who had been perfecting warfare for thousands of years. The silence in the chamber was heavy and oppressive. Zarthik pressed on, knowing he had to make them understand. If we attack them again, we will lose. Not eventually. No, completely. We are not facing a species that will negotiate from a position of weakness. We are facing a species that has never known how to be weak. Then we gather every ship in Korvax space and attack with overwhelming force, Morgoth declared. We crush them before they become a threat to our expansion. With all due respect, Warlord, you did not witness what I witnessed, Zarthik replied. One destroyer. That is all the humans sent to patrol their borders. One destroyer, and it destroyed a force that would have conquered 10 younger civilizations. A fleet of such ships would be unstoppable, and they clearly have more than one. The crew we spoke to indicated that what we faced was routine patrol strength. We do not have enough firepower to win a war against humanity. The council fell into debate, voices rising and falling, arguments being made and countered. Finally, the eldest member of the council, an ancient Korvax named Serathon, raised a hand for silence. We will vote, Serathon declared. Aggression or diplomacy? The choice before us is clear. Warlord Morgoth proposes continued military confrontation. Supreme Commander Zarthik proposes peaceful contact. Those in favor of aggression, raise your appendages. Only 3 members voted for continued war. The others abstained or voted for peace. The decision was made. The Korvax would seek diplomatic contact with humanity. 2 weeks later, Ambassador Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the main observation deck of the diplomatic station, looking out at the beautiful, neutral space station that served as a meeting ground for all civilizations. Dr. Vasquez was a woman in her late 50s. with dark hair streaked with silver, and eyes that had seen enough suffering to understand the importance of peace. She had spent 30 years working in human diplomacy, and today marked the moment when everything would change. Their arriving, her aide, a young man named Thomas, said quietly beside her. The Korvax delegation just pulled into the docking bay. Vasquez took a deep breath. She had studied the military records of the battle, read every tactical analysis, spoken with Commander Harrow herself. She understood what humanity was capable of. Now she had to convince the Korvax that conflict was not the answer. The meeting chamber was neutral ground, a place where a dozen different species had negotiated treaties and agreements. Supreme Commander Zarthek entered with 2 attendants, moving with the careful deliberation of someone approaching a wild animal. His armor bore the scars of battle, and his eyes, sharp and intelligent, studied Dr. Vasquez with careful interest. Asterisk Vasquez stepped forward and extended her hand. In Korvax culture, physical contact from an inferior species was considered an insult, but Vasquez wasn't concerned with insulting anyone today. She was concerned with building understanding. To her surprise, Zarthik studied her hand for a moment, then carefully extended one of his armored limbs and made contact. It was the gesture of equals acknowledging each other. Dr. Elena Vasquez, she introduced herself. I represent the United Human Coalition. I've come to discuss peace. Supreme Commander Zarthik, he replied, his translator picking up the subtleties of his voice. I've come because my people must understand what happened in Sector Gamma 7. I hope you can help me explain it to them. They sat across from each other at a long table, and Vasquez began to speak. She told him about humanity's evolution on Earth, about the constant struggle to survive in a world that was actively hostile to their existence. She told him about the wars humans had fought with each other, the weapons they had developed, the mistakes they had made and learned from. She explained that human technology was not built to conquer from a position of strength, but to survive in positions of weakness. Asterisk. We don't want war, Vasquez said, her voice quiet but firm. We want trade. We want knowledge. We want to learn from other civilizations and share what we've learned. But we will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. That's not in our nature. The battle that destroyed your fleet wasn't an act of aggression. It was self-defense. Commander Harrow gave you 3 chances to leave. Your leader chose war. Zarthik listened carefully, his eyes never leaving Vasquez's face. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I believe you, he said. What I witnessed in Sector Gamma 7 confirmed what your words describe. Humans fight not because they enjoy war, but because they understand that sometimes it is necessary. Your species has learned lessons that took us millennia to grasp. Perhaps we can learn from you as well. Over the following hours, the 2 representatives worked out the framework for peace. The Korvax would withdraw from all disputed territories. Trade routes would be established. Cultural exchanges would begin. Most importantly, the 2 species would work together to ensure that peace was maintained throughout this sector of the galaxy. When the agreement was finalized, Zarthik stood and extended his hand to Vasquez once more. This time, there was no hesitation. There was only respect between 2 species that had learned to understand each other through the universal language of strength and honor. Your species is remarkable. Dr. Vasquez, Zarthik said, as they stood together looking out at the stars. You faced overwhelming odds and emerged victorious, not because you were stronger or faster or more numerous, but because you understood something that most species only learn through bitter experience. Victory without understanding is hollow. Peace must be built on mutual respect. Vasquez smiled slightly. That's the thing about humans, Supreme Commander. We've never been the fastest learners, or the strongest, or the most naturally talented at anything. But we're stubborn. We don't give up. We adapt. We overcome. And when we find common ground with someone, we hold on to it with everything we have. As the sun rose over Neutral Space Station on that historic day, a new chapter began in the galaxy's history. Humanity had arrived not as conquerors seeking dominion, but as survivors offering their hard-won wisdom to those willing to listen. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Asterisk.